Okay, so at 6 we can start. So firstly, hello, good evening everyone. Once again, welcome back to a second class on the same day, right? I hope it's not tiring because it's just a 1 hour class, right? So anyways, a couple of you are already here. We'll wait for others to join, but in the meanwhile, we can do the introductions, right? So, my name is Nikitha, as most of you all know, and I'm the history educator here at Unacademy's Scholars channel. And I take classes for both standard 11th and 12th, right? Regarding the Telegram channel for the scholars, there's one, and the link for that is in the description below of this video. I highly urge you all to go join it because if there are any updates regarding like cancellation of classes or postponing of classes, you will be given intimation on the Telegram channel first. So that way it's highly helpful. So please go join it if you all haven't joined already. And also there's an emerge test going on for 10th and 12th standard students right now, which means it's applicable to you. So these are basically free live mock tests which are conducted every week by Unacademy, and these are aligned with the latest CBSE guidelines. So that means these can act as some kind of practice test for your term 1 boards, right? And this week it's happening on 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th of October, right? The link again is in the description below of this video. Go check it out and enroll yourselves and take part in the quiz. And quickly moving on to a couple of Unacademy Plus features. It's that you can actually sit at your own houses and listen to some of the classes taught by top educators of India. On these are live classes, all of them are available on one single platform. There's unlimited access to so many courses from different departments and disciplines, and there are regular doubt clearing sessions. Alongside that, there are answer writing sessions, practice tests and live test series. There's exhaustive coverage of syllabus by every educator at Unacademy Plus. There's mentorship provided to you. There's guidance provided to you, along with access to study materials, which are usually in the form of PDF. And during the examinations time, it will be highly helpful, just like a revision, right? So a little bit about the plus pricing. There are 6 ranges of subscription. Actually, the first is a 3-month subscription. Then there's 9. Then there's 12, 15, 18 and 24. Right? The prices are clearly listed just beside the duration. Go ahead and feel free to subscribe to whichever one you would want to. Right? And coming to Iconic, here the features are even better and greater when compared to Plus, in the sense that there's personal mentorship provided to you, there are live doubt solving sessions, there are weekly reports. Along with that, there's a direct parent connect and also study planners, right? And the durations are the same for Iconic, just like Plus, the same 6 ranges. But when it comes to pricing, the Iconic might hike a little bit because of the special features. So again, they are up on the screen. Have a look at them and go ahead. And lastly, before going into the actual content for today, let me just tell you that there is some sort of special content which you can actually avail by following the steps which I'm going to mention right now. The first is you have to download the Unacademy's learning app on your mobile phone, right, from your Play Stores, and then log into the app with proper credentials and then select your goal, which is 12 standard, right? And on the menu button on the top left corner, under that there's an option called special. Click on that and it'll ask you for an invitation code, right? You can use this one, which is TUM10, and you'll be basically given access to the special content, right? So that's a fairly easy process. Cool. So that's about a little of the pitch we had for today. Anyways, a couple of you all joined right now. So good evening, everyone who just joined. Yukti is here with us. Yash is also back. Cool. So hello, everyone. Cool. Then we can start, I guess. Yeah, it's 6:06. We will start. So in the morning, we've talked in bits and pieces about the Vijayanagara Empire, right? We've focused mainly on the polity part, like who ruled after who, which dynasty came after what, and stuff like that, right? Their military achievements and all. But now we'll be talking about the arrangement of the city in specific, right? So we'll see how the city is designed. So that is going to be like the basic sub theme for today's class. Yeah, we're still in chapter 7, we're still dealing with Vijayanagara Empire, right? Anyways, cool. So Vijayanagara, as you know, is the name of the empire and also the capital city, right? Before it was captured by the Deccani Sultanates. Later on, it moved to Tirupati and all. We have seen that, but let's not go there. Let's just see when the Vijayanagara was still the capital of the empire, right? So we look at most of the features of the Vijayanagara city, right? How it was structured, what type of buildings were built and all, along with its surroundings, right? So we're in chapter 7 right now, and in the past 5-6 chapters we have come across several cities, right? So in each of the cities we've also had unique plans or physical layouts, that are very distinctive to that particular city, right? For example, Mohenjo-daro, we've looked at like Citadel, Lower Town, Upper Town, and then we've looked at several other cities. Just like that, we'll be talking about Vijayanagara right now. Yeah, Vijayanagara also had its own distinctive physical layout and also the way in which the buildings were constructed, right? So we'll talk about them in detail, but before that, just have a look at this map, right? It is a rough sketch of the Vijayanagara city, yeah, during its peak time. So if you can see, here there's something written called urban core, right? So this is basically the place where all the rich people used to live. Like ordinary people, they couldn't afford to live there because it's costly. So only the urban core, like the urban elite, used to live here. And then here's the sacred center, right? Sacred center is the place where mostly temples and all are located, right? And then there's royal center here. All the palaces, kings and courtiers and ministers used to live there, right? So if you see here, there's clearly a distinction between everything. Yeah, between the temple complexes, between local people, between rich people, between kings, right? There are so many distinctions. That's just like a rough layout of the Vijayanagara city, right? We'll talk about this in detail in the next slides. Yeah, cool. Okay, Manshi is here with us. Hello, Manshi. Cool, then we'll quickly move on to the next slide, right? But before delving deeper and finding out about the elements of the city itself, let's just see what kind of sources are available to us when it comes to Vijayanagara, right? These can be textual sources, these can be archaeological sources, anything. But in this slide, we'll be mostly focusing on the textual sources, right? Which would give us a lot of information about Vijayanagara Empire. So all the kings that were there in as a part of the Vijayanagara Empire and also the Nayakas, right? We have seen who Nayakas are in the morning's class, right? So all of these, they used to sponsor so many writers and authors to write down histories, right? I've also mentioned this specifically that some kings used to write histories themselves. For example, Krishna Devaraya, right? He wrote few books himself. So that being said, the point here is there was a lot of literature being produced. Yeah, literature in terms of how the society is working, how the polity is working. Like if, for example, if somebody is waging a war against Vijayanagara, who won in the war? What is anybody donating anything to the temple? Yeah, any important events happening in the empire? Anything, literally anything which is happening, all of that was written down. Yeah, it was recorded in the form of accounts, right? So if we read them, obviously we'll get to have like a rough picture of what happened in Vijayanagara Empire, right? So that's number one. That in itself is sufficient and a great source. But we also have additional sources which are highly helpful, right? So these sources are basically the foreign sources. Yeah. So how did foreign people get to know about Vijayanagara? Simple answer, right? Because all of these people are travelers. They either came into the Vijayanagara Empire for trade purposes and all, right? So when they came, they observed everything what was happening and then they wrote down in their accounts, right? So we'll quickly have a look at who these people are, who these foreigners are, and what did they write. Yeah. So there are so many, but we'll just look at the notable accounts. Yeah. The first one is of the Italian trader named Nicole de Conti. Right? Again, a very important figure. So try to remember his name if possible. He is an Italian trader. Yeah, he came all the way from Italy just for trade purposes. But however long he was residing in the Vijayanagara Empire, he noted down everything. Right? And then the second is Abdur Razak, again a very influential figure. He didn't come for trade purposes, but deliberately the ruler of Persia, present day Iran, right? He sent Abdur Razak to the court of Vijayanagara ruler as an ambassador, right? So look at the various reasons why people are coming. Some are coming from trade purposes, some are coming as ambassadors, right? So that's like a huge variation. The second is Abdur Razak, and the third is a merchant named Afanasi Nikitin, right? The spelling is here. He's Afanasi Nikitin. He is from Russia. He also came in as a merchant, right? So all of these people visited in the 15th century, right? Usually when the first two dynasties were ruling, Saluas and the first two dynasties were ruling, right? And the century changed. Tuluas took over. Krishnadev Raya was ruling, right? During Krishnadev Raya's time, there are some other people who came. For example, Duarte Barbosa, right? You do not need to remember all these names, but just saying, right? So Duarte Barbosa, and then there's Domingo Pace. Domingo Pace is again a very important figure. And then there's Fanao Nunez. These three people visited Vijayanagara Empire in the 16th century, right? And all three are from Portugal. So why am I mentioning all these names? Because these are authors, they are writers, right? They have written so many accounts about Vijayanagara, and we get a lot of information through their books if you read their books, right? So that's why they are important to us. Okay, so that's about the sources, right? So let's quickly have a look at the source box in your textbook, which is source box number 3, right? It's titled as A Sprawling City. Yeah. So this is an excerpt from the book written by Domingo Pace. Domingo Pace, we've seen in the last slide, he was a Portugal ambassador, right? So when he came in, he wrote a couple of books on India, and in one of them he discusses in detail about how the city of Vijayanagara looked like, right? How did it look? Like, what is the physical appearance? What are the features, right? He mentions all of that. It's a fairly simple read. I'll go through it line by line, right? So the size of the city, he says that I'm not mentioning the size of the city because I just can't see the whole of the city at one glance, right? Because it's too big, number one. Number two, there is no such place or position in the whole of the city where you can go and look at the whole city at one go, right? So because of some external factors, he couldn't look at the city together, and that is why he's not able to estimate the size of the city, right? He says that, and he also mentions on the other side that roughly according to his estimates that it might be as large as Rome, right? Just imagine, he's comparing Vijayanagara Empire with Rome. Rome is such a classic city, right? But the fact that he's comparing it with Rome, we have to figure out that Vijayanagara in some sense is as important as Rome. Yeah. And then he also says that it's not a level playing field. Yeah, it's not just plains everywhere, but we also have a several range of hills, right? There are gardens, there are many grooves of trees, right? He mentions all of this in his accounts, right? He also says that there are a lot of water bodies, because we have seen how this particular Vijayanagara empire is located in the Raichur Doab, right? A part of it is in the Raichur Doab. Krishna River, Tungabhadra River, all of them are flowing through the Vijayanagara empire, right? So there are so many rivers, lakes, and also interesting fact is that uh, near the palace regions, like where the palaces are located, there are usually palm groves, right? Like palm trees and other rich fruit bearing trees, right? We don't know the reasons as to why, but that is usually the scenario that was observed by most of the travelers about the location of the Vijayanagara city, right? So that is a excerpt from Domingo Pace, where he mentions about Vijayanagara. Yeah, cool. So now I think we can go deep into talking about the elements or features of the city itself, right? Till now we have looked at like the sources and source boxes, but now we'll be talking about the city in detail. So the first sub theme we'll be exploring under this is the water resources, right? Very, very crucial for any empire to survive. Yeah. So yeah, like we most of us know, right? Like obviously there's Tungabhadra Dam and Tungabhadra River as a part of the Vijayanagara city, right? And obviously that's like the most striking feature about the location. Yeah, because of so many water sources, the city itself is thriving. They don't have shortage of water, right? And usually this Tungabhadra flows in the northeasterly direction, yeah, and it forms a natural basin, so there was not really an issue or problem about water. Yeah, so that water was sorted there. And the surrounding landscape, like around these water bodies, is also stunning because there are so many hills located there, right? Imagine, like, there are water bodies, there are hills. How elegant the scenario must have looked, right? There are water bodies, there are hills, and these hills almost surrounded the whole city, right? They are that humongous. And a number of streams used to flow down these rocky hills. Yeah, anywhere it's the same situation, right? Like usually rivers flow down the hills or mountains, and that is exactly what's happening in the Vijayanagara city as well. Yeah, yeah. So one important thing here is when there are water sources available to you in the form of waterfalls or the streams flowing down the rocky surfaces, you can actually take advantage of it, right? And try to store water instead of wasting it. Yeah, how do you do that exactly? It was actually done by Vijayanagara rulers in a very efficient manner by building embankments along these streams, right? So just imagine a rough scenario in your head, like there's a hill, there's water flowing down the hill, and then you try to build an embankment is nothing but a wall or like a barrier sort of thing, right? So once you built an embankment around the water stream, yeah, obviously the water will be stored, right? It won't be wasted. And the fact that most of the Vijayanagara empire is in the arid zone of the peninsula, yeah, it's in the plateau, right? Like the Deccan plateau. So obviously it's arid. It did not have sufficient rainfall, but bare minimum rainfall was there, right? So whenever there was rainfall, by building embankments, they would obviously store water, and then they would use this water for further uses, right? Like in terms of irrigation or for cleaning purposes or anything else, the water is later used. But the first step is the preserving of water. And how do you do that? By building embankments. And that is exactly what the Vijayanagara rulers also did, right? Cool. So that's about the water resources. So tanks, embankments, everything is the same, right? So one of the most important tanks that was built in the early years of the 15th century, right? If I'm not wrong, this is somewhere in like the 1420s or 1430s, right? A very crucial tank was built, which is called as Kamalapuram tank, right? A very important source of water. It almost used to irrigate so many hectares of agricultural land. That is how huge this tank was, right? It's a very famous one. And water from this tank not only irrigated fields, as I was telling you, it was used for irrigation purposes, but other than that, it also had another purpose, right? Because it used to, like the water from this tank in the form of a channel used to go to the royal center. Yeah, again, just go back to the figure which I showed you in the beginning of the class. There are three distinctions, right? Like temple complexes, royal centers, and urban core. So the whole of the royal center was fed by water coming from the Kamalapuram tank, right? So that's Kamalapuram tank. And another important water canal was Hiriya Canal. Its name was Hiriya, right? It's another prominent waterworks during that time, but now it is in ruins. It's not used anymore, right? So this canal drew water from a dam across the Tungabhadra. Again, it's a canal. It needs to have some source of water, right? So there's a dam right across Tungabhadra river, and from the dam this channel is connected, right? And that channel or canal is called as Hiriya, and it used to irrigate the crops of sacred center and the urban core, right? So Kamalapuram tank used to irrigate royal center fields, and Hiriya canal used to irrigate the valley between sacred center and urban core, right? So these are two important water bodies which are noteworthy, which were built in the Vijayanagara Empire, right? And apparently it is claimed that the Hiriya canal was built by the Sangama dynasty, right? Like the first ever dynasty. So that's about the construction of canals and tanks, which are again very crucial. Cool. So that's water bodies. Now we'll quickly jump into fortifications and roads, right? But before going any further, I'll just ask if there are any questions, guys. Any questions, please put them down in the chat box. I'll answer them. Okay, I do not see any questions, therefore I'll continue forward, right? But in case there are any, just put them down in the chat box, right? So from water resources, we'll now be moving on to discussing about fortifications and roads, right? Okay, thanks for responding, Sohana. Got it. Cool. So fortifications and roads, right? Again, fortifications we have seen in n number of cities. Just like that, Vijayanagara city was also fortified, right? These are some of the fortifications are nothing but big walls, right? Like huge walls surrounding the city. Yeah, and there are n number of fortifications for the Vijayanagara city. We look at a couple of them, some of them, and we'll also see why there are in the places that they were built, right? So yeah, Abdur Razak, right? Like we've talked about him in the source section as well. So he's actually an ambassador sent by ruler of Persia. We've known that information, and he was actually sent to Calicut, right? Calicut is in present day Kerala. It's not called as Calicut anymore. Instead, it is called as Kozhikode, right? The change in names of the city. And he visited in the 15th century, right? So he was actually impressed by the fortifications of Vijayanagara city, right? He wrote about them in extensive detail in one of his books, and he almost mentions like 7 lines of forts, like 7 different kinds of forts, right? Again, we won't go into detail because that's not important. Yeah, neither they are mentioned as a part of your textbook, but just remember that there are 7 lines of fort mentioned by Abdur Razak in one of his books, right? So these forts actually encircled not just the city in large, right? Again, I'll just draw some figure here. So let's say this is the city, right? Like Vijayanagara city. Fortifications for any city, they are usually built around the city, right? It's just one wall, like around the city. But that is not the case with Vijayanagara Empire, because obviously there is one wall surrounding. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's one wall obviously surrounding the city, but there are other fortifications as well within the city, right? And why is that so? We'll look at it later. But just to give you a rough idea, let's say this is the agricultural land, right? Where so much of the agriculture productivity comes from. Even like surrounding this agricultural land, also there was another kind of fortification. There was another kind of wall built, right? So that is what I mean by forests had their own fortification, agricultural hinterland had its own fortification, and also the city at large also had its own fortification, right? So that's the special feature of the Vijayanagara fortifications, right? Cool. The outermost wall linked the hills surrounding the city. Pretty self-explanatory. And whatever these walls are there, like these are masonry constructions, right? These are massive. Like in terms of height, they are too long. But when it comes to the width of the walls, they are not that broad. But honestly speaking, they were slightly tapered, right? Tapered is nothing but narrow, yeah, or thin. So the breadth of the walls are pretty thinner when compared to the height of the walls, right? And again, another important thing is cement was not used at all to construct these walls. Now we might wonder how that is possible. How on earth is that possible? Right? Because cement or mortar is the only binding force which helps in the sticking of rocks or bricks together, right? But cement was definitely not used at all. Then how did they actually settle down? Like how did they fit, right? We look at that also. So the explanation to this is that there are so many stone blocks, yeah, like basic, let's just say bricks in our generation, right? So these stone blocks were actually wedge shaped, right? I'm pretty sure everybody knows what a wedge shaped is. Yeah, we have wedges, right? Like wedges, sandals the girls wear. Yeah, so that is a wedge shape, something like this, right? So that's roughly a wedge shape. And there's another stone wall as well, yeah, which is of another wedge shape. Like let's say this is an inverted wedge shape, right? So if you place both of them together, they stick correctly, like they correspond with each other, right? And in that case, mortar or cement was not necessary, right? Because of the shape of the blocks, it was very like it was okay not to use cement, right? And in case, let's say, let's say these are another two stone blocks, but one of the stone blocks had a crack in it, right? Let's say it is not exactly in the shape of a wedge, but this part is broken. Then all these small rubbles and stones were used to fix this part. There was some kind of stone put into that empty space, right? Either way, it provided support. They were very strong, but nonetheless, cement was never used, right? I'm hoping this part is clear. Excuse me for my bad drawings, but like, I'm hoping that's clear. Cool. But in case you all have any questions regarding this, just put them down in the chat box. Anyways, so that's about the construction of the walls, right? And also another important feature of the fortifications is that square and rectangular bastions projected outwards. Again, what are bastions? So, okay, time for another figure. Let's say this is a wall, right? Like some random fortification wall. So in between, there used to be some outward spaces, right? Yeah, like the walls sometimes they were protruding outside, they were projecting outwards, right? And these are very crucial, especially when there are some kinds of wars that are happening on the forts, right? So these square and rectangular bastions are used for strategic tactical purposes in times of war, right? So that's why these bastions were heavily built. And yeah, as I was telling you, another important feature is the fortification of the agricultural tracts, right? So yeah, I mentioned this point already, that wherever the agricultural tracts are, surrounding that also the forts were built. So in regards to the construction of the city itself, Abdul Razak, again the Persian ambassador who visited Kozhikode in the 15th century, he notes that between the first, second, and the third walls, there are cultivated fields, gardens, and houses. Again, like there are n number of walls. Like the basic meaning is there are 7 walls, as we have seen, right? So between the first and second wall, there are cultivated fields, like agricultural areas. Between the second and the third, there are gardens, and between the third and the fourth, there are houses, right? So there's like a rough estimate of what Abdur Razak tells us with the help of his writings. Yeah, and in the same manner, Pace also notes, Domingo Pace, right? He also observes that from this first circuit, like circuit is the fortification, right? Until you enter the city, there is a great distance in which fields, like there are fields, right? He's also saying that once you cross the first circuit, there are so many agricultural lands where rice is sown mostly, right? Because southern part of India, wheat does not grow much, but there's so much of space for the rice to be grown, right? So that is why so much of paddy you can see in the southern Indian fields, and in the agricultural tracts of Vijayanagara Empire as well. Rice was heavily sown, and then going further deeper, you have all these gardens, right? And then there are lakes. So that is what Domingo Pace notes. Cool. So we have textual evidences, right, from Domingo Pace and Abdur Razak about the construction of the fortifications, and these are also corroborated by the archaeological evidences, right? In the 19th, 20th centuries, so many archaeologists went to the Vijayanagara city. They started examining all the ruins, right? They have made note of every possible tract that they can come across, and they have noted it down. And yes, they have evidence that whatever Domingo Pace and Abdur Razak was saying about the fortifications that was in fact true, right? So archaeological evidence, textual evidence corroborating with each other, classic example, right? Okay, so they basically conclude that agricultural tract was between the sacred center and the urban core, right? And this tract was serviced by an elaborate canal system drawing water from the Tungabhadra. Obviously, right, as I was saying you, this area did not receive much rainfall. There was scanty rainfall, right? But in order for the crops to be grown, obviously it needed a lot of water. And from the Tungabhadra river, a canal system was established for these agricultural tracts to be irrigated, right? Cool. So that's about the agriculture and irrigation. But now the important question to ask is, why do you think that agricultural tracts were incorporated within these fortified areas? Very important question, right? Till now we've been saying that fortifications are built around agricultural lands, but why? What is the need for that to be done? Right? A very important question we need to ask ourselves. And for this, again, it is tied to the political reasons, right? Because there can be wars, there can be battles. Yeah, any kingdom can come and wage a war against the Vijayanagara kingdom at any point of time. So, in order to keep themselves protected, in order for them not to starve to death, yeah, that is why these fortifications are built around the agricultural tracts. And to just look at it in detail, so what used to happen is there are some kind of sieges. Like, what exactly are sieges? It's a kind of war technique, right? Usually if it's a battle, two parties will fight against each other, yeah, but sieges are immediate. The other kingdom will not know that somebody is coming to siege the fort, right? So these are very, very immediate. So let's say this is the fort, right? And towards this side, Vijayanagara Empire is there, right? And towards the other side, there is influx of, let's say, Bijapur Sultanates who were coming. A rough example, right? So when Bijapur Sultan and his army, they are coming towards the fortifications of the Vijayanagara Empire, it's a sudden thing, right? So once these people are here, Vijayanagara people cannot go out, they can't go to the markets, they can't go anywhere, right? They have to stay there. These sieges are not just for 1 day or 2 days, they almost happen for months and years together, right? In such situations, if there are agricultural lands here, Vijayanagara people can live inside the territory itself and they can cultivate their own agricultural lands, right? So that they would not be starved to death. So now I'm hoping everybody gets the reason as to why there are fortifications. Yeah, the basic answer is not to die because of lack of food, right? So in order for the food to be produced, if agricultural lands are fortified, then it would be easy during the times of sieges, right? Cool. Usually these sieges used to happen on every empire, yeah, but every empire did not have this type of strategy. They just used to have large storage of granaries within the fortified areas, yeah, like all these storage places and all. But Vijayanagara people were too careful. Like, in case these stored grains were also over, they had enough facilities to cultivate new grains, right? They are a step ahead. That's a great thing. That's a great strategy. Yes? Cool. So now what happens is the rulers of Vijayanagara adopted, obviously, it's a bit expensive because building fortifications is not very cheap. It involves a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of resources, right? Even though it is expensive, for their own protection and safety, Vijayanagara Empire built forts around the agricultural tracks, right? In order to keep themselves safe. So that's fortification number one, let's say. Yeah. So the second line of fortification went round the inner core of the urban complex. Again, we have seen the urban center, right, where usually the rich people live. Ordinary people could not afford to live there. And within the urban complex itself, there is another fortification, right? And there's also third fortification surrounding the royal center. Yeah. And each set of, like, these fortifications are there, but whatever buildings were there, like for example great monuments or palaces or temple structures and all, they had their own protective walls, right? Like high walls, super long walls. So what are we seeing here? As we have seen in the morning, that Vijayanagara Empire always was in wars or battles with some random neighboring kings, be it Deccani Sultanates, be it Gajapatis from Orissa, be it anybody. In order to protect themselves, yeah, all these fortifications and big walls were constructed, right? And all of these forts entered through well guarded gates, right? They had amazing gates with a proper roadways to connect all these gates, right? And these gateways, if you look at some of the pictures, just try googling them if you all have time. So these gateways have a very unique architectural style, right? We'll look at what that architectural style is in the next slide. But just remember that these gateways were very well decorated. Yeah, they had all these sculptures, they had all these domes, arcs and all, right? So this one, right? There's a, let's say this is the gate, right? Like a rough figure of the gate. So when you're trying to enter through these gate into the inside territory or whatever, here there's sometimes there are like dome like structures, or sometimes there are arc arc like structures, right? So it's highly decorated. And if you look at these features, one can easily identify that these resemble some kind of architecture introduced by Turkish sultans. Why? Because all these domes and arcs are Islamic style. Yeah, that's one point which we already know. Like whatever domes or arcs we come across, it is definitely a part of the Islamic architecture. Usually Hindus do not follow the arcs and domes, right? So that is why art historians or art historian scholars, they refer to this kind of architecture as Indo-Islamic, right? So what exactly is Indo-Islamic? The elements of Indianness as well as Islamic art were merged together, right? And that is why they have a common name called as Indo-Islamic, right? And obviously, like, why will it happen? Because Vijayanagaras were constantly in touch with the Deccani Sultanates, right? Deccan Sultanates were obviously Muslim rulers, yeah. So inspired by them, looking at the Deccani Sultanates, Vijayanagara people also adopted the uh, dome and arc style of the Islamic art, right? So yeah, that's about the architectural styling. And there are so many roads within the city, yeah, and also like external roads leading to the city. So all of these have been studied in extensive detail by the archaeologists. So if any of y'all uh, have time, I would highly recommend to go through any of these archaeological documents or records. They're very extensive, right? If you read all of them, it almost looks like you're in the picture, right? You'll be experiencing all of that. They are in that detail, right? So anyways, so gateways are there, pavements are there, all of these have been studied by the archaeologists, right? And whatever the roads were constructed, usually they were constructed in the plain surfaces where there are valleys, right? Because it's easy to construct roads on a valley rather than a rocky terrain, for example hills, right? Obviously it's hard to construct roads on the rocky surfaces. It's not feasible, right? So that's why just in the plain areas we have so many roads. And all these roads were very well constructed, they were very well laid. Yeah, they connected these gateways to very important bazaars, to temple complexes, to urban centers. Like everything was connected via the good roads, right? So that's about the fortifications and roads to a certain extent. I know it's a lot to take in because there's a lot of new information, yeah, unusual than the ones which we actually look at, but nonetheless they're important, right? Very important, especially in terms of examination point of view. And even if you look at the sample paper which we have discussed a couple of weeks earlier, you'll also notice that there are a lot of questions from the fortifications and walls, this thing, right? Like that particular sub theme. So that's why just please go back to your textbook or any of the notes that you're taking down and listen to the video again or whatever. Do something, but understand the concepts, right? If you do not understand anything, just ask me, I'll repeat it again. Yeah, cool. So we're done with two now. The first is water resources, the water supply, and the second is fortifications and walls. Yeah, the last thing which we'll be looking at for today is the urban core, right? So what was actually within the urban center, right? That part of the urban core which was towards the down part of the city map, right? So as I was telling you, it's a very rich area, wealthy area. Only like elite people used to live there. Ordinary people could not afford to live in the urban core because it's very, very expensive, right? All these lavish houses and all. So even when archaeological evidence, if you look at them, when archaeologists are excavating all these areas, they have come across the same thing, right? Within the urban core, all these massive structures can be identified, but not smaller houses, right? So that's like the crucial content of the urban core. And how do we actually come to a conclusion that wealthy people used to live there, right? Just saying that these people used to live here, these people used to live somewhere else is not enough, right? We need to provide certain evidence, certain proofs. Yeah. So one kind of proofs is we actually archaeologists actually came across a lot of Chinese porcelain, right? So what exactly is porcelain? It's a material, right? It's usually again, it's called as Chinese porcelain because it's another kind of unique material which is usually used to make all these items, right? Be it decorative items like vessels, utensils, or some kind of flower pots. Yeah, all these decorative items, they were made of the material called as Chinese porcelain. It's very costly, like too expensive. Yeah, normal people though definitely they can't afford it. Yeah, so once archaeologists excavated the urban core, they have found so many Chinese porcelain materials, right? um, Especially in the northeastern corner of the urban core, and that is how they came to a conclusion that only rich people used to live here, because only rich people could afford Chinese porcelain, right? So basically these are traders or merchants which are very, very wealthy, right? So that is urban core. And roughly we could also say that these people living in the urban core, mostly they are Muslim people. Yeah. And how do we come to that conclusion again? Because there are so many tombs and mosques located in this particular urban core, right? Why would Hindus build mosques and tombs? Right? Basic question. They wouldn't do that. So, tombs and mosques actually provide us information that this is a Muslim residential area, right? even though you come across a lot of tombs and mosques, again, another unique architectural resemblance here is that these mosques or tombs have an element of Hindu architecture within them, right? Because mandapas is another unique feature of the temples, right? Mandapas, gopurams, and all these are temple features. Now, these can be seen on these tombs and mosques. So that is why, even though the area is resided by Muslims, it had some local influence, and that is why these mandapas are there on the tombs and mosques, right? So again, what do we see here? It's an intermixing of culture and architecture, right? Even in the previous slides, we have seen how the Muslim features like arcs and domes were built on fortification walls. Here we are seeing Hindu features like mandapas and gopurams. They are built on tombs and mosques, right? So it's an interplay of culture. Um, any questions till here, guys? Any questions? Please just put them down in the chat box. Okay, I do not see any questions. I think I can move forward. Um, yeah, where were we? We finished this chapter, the slide, right? So, quickly moving on to the next. These are actually one of the excerpts written by a Portuguese traveler called Barbosa, the name we have heard of in the previous slides, in the source box slides, right? He visited in the 16th century, as we already know, and he describes about the houses of ordinary people. So now we're not talking about the urban core. We're talking about the ordinary people's houses which are located outside the urban core, right? These actually did not survive because they're very weak. Yeah, they did not have proper like strong walls and strong roofs. That is why, because of ravages of time, they have been destroyed and they are now in ruins, right? But if you look at some kind of archaeological evidence, it tells us that the ordinary houses of like the houses of ordinary people, they are thatched, right? So again, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what thatched is, right? So again, these are very like feeble roofs, right? They're not as strong and they're very easily portable, right? So these thatched roofs were there, but nonetheless they were well built, right? Like they would be there for around like 50, 60 years, but not as strong that they would survive for like centuries together, right? Like roughly, like suppose I'm an ordinary people living in Vijayanagara Empire, right? If I construct a house with thatched roof, that would stay till I will die, right? But after I die, I can't promise you that it will stay forever, right? So like a short, like temporary lived houses they are, and these are usually built according to the occupations followed by people. So again, what does this mean? Let's say this is a street, right? In one side of the street, whatever houses are here, let's say these houses belong to the I don't know, like goldsmiths, right? So all the goldsmiths used to live together, right? And if you move a little ahead, all the carpenters used to live together, or like in some other occupation. And here, people belonging to another occupation used to live, right? So that's what I mean by houses being arranged according to the occupations, right? So that's what Barbosa says us. Barbosa, in his detailed account, says gives us this information. Yeah, and there are so many field surveys that were conducted, right? They indicate that the entire area was dotted with numerous shrines and small temples, highly dominated by Hindus, right? We've like seen how kings themselves used to fund a lot of temples, right? So many new temples were coming up, old ones were being renovated, remodeled, right? In the same manner, like local people also used to construct a lot of smaller temples, like within their own budget, right? If you literally cross across a street in the Vijayanagara Empire, you will definitely come across more than 2 3 temples in every street, right? I'm not telling these are very huge. Let them be as simple as one small room, right? With a statue of a god inside it. So they are there, like there's so many in number. So what does this indicate? That people in Vijayanagara Empire were very, very religious, yeah, very spiritual, and that is why they have so many temples within the streets, right? So yeah, that's about the religious life of the people. And lastly, the survey also indicates that wells or rainwater tanks as well as temple tanks, right? These are all different kinds of water resources, water bodies. Ordinary town dwellers for the house purposes, for cleaning or washing or cooking, whatever, they used to get water from these sources, right? Like local wells or local temple tanks and all. So this is the source of water for the ordinary town dwellers. Cool. So that is it we have for today's class. Okay, that's fair enough. We have completed in time today. Okay, that's about the how the cities were constructed in greater detail, right? Tomorrow we'll be looking at some other aspects of not tomorrow. When do we have the next class? We have class on Sunday actually, right? We have a class on Sunday in the morning at 11 a.m. So then we'll be discussing about the next sub themes of the chapter, right? But any questions still here? Suhana, copper कहाँ मिला था? Can you provide some kind of context to it because I'm not sure what exactly your question is. Alfaz, regarding the quick prep classes, we can have them. We can have those preparation classes or like one-shot revisions, right? But that's only possible once we finish the chapter, right? So yeah, like the rough plan I have like as of now is finish this chapter as soon as possible, then have a quiz on this chapter, right? And then quickly do a class on all the maps because map pointing is also very, very essential, right? And then we can have all these one shot revisions or like preparation classes as you're telling, right? So that's like a rough plan I have in mind. But if you all have any other suggestions, you all can put them down in the chat box, right? Okay, you're asking about the Harappan civilization, Suhana. Not a problem. You can ask any doubts you have. Not a problem. So regarding the copper, it's basically coming from the K3 mines of Rajasthan, right? So we've talked about this in relation to the gold mines, right? So gold is usually coming from the southern part of India, especially the Karnataka region. And copper on the other side is coming from K3 region of Rajasthan, right? Khetri. Yeah. Uh, I'm hoping that answers your question, Suhana. Oman. I mean, most of the gold which Harappans used was coming from the Indian subcontinent itself, but sometimes they also used to get it from outside India, and that is where Oman comes into picture, right? Oman also has a lot of copper reserves and all. Sometimes they used to be imported into the Indian subcontinent from Oman, but mostly it is from K3. You're right there, like Oman is also a copper rich field. Cool. That answers your question. Any other clarifications? Not this chapter, any chapter, anything, guys. Just you all can ask anything. Just keep typing down your questions, right? I'll try to wind this session up in the meanwhile. Anyways, regarding the plus and iconic subscriptions I was talking about in the beginning of this class, there's a special offer going on right now, which is the Dashra Dhamaka offer, right? Obviously Dashra. So the offer is till 18th of October, which is Monday, right? It's a limited offer. So if you use the code, which is TUM10, right, you'll obviously get a 10% off straight away, like while you're subscribing. But if you do it before 18th of October, you're going to get an additional 10% off, right? So go grab yours before the offer ends. And lastly, if you like the content of these videos, please do like it as soon as the live stream ends, and comment down below, share it as much as possible, and subscribe to the channel Unacademy, as well as scholars in particular, right? Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I know it's festival, I know it's a Friday evening, but we're running out of time. We need to complete the chapter. We have so much coming up, right? So that's why I had to take a second class as well on a festival day. But thank you so much anyways for tuning in. So nextly, I'll see you guys on Sunday, right, at 11 a.m. where we'll be talking in continuation of the Vijayanagara Empire, right? Cool then. So that brings us to the end of the class. In case anybody has questions, just hang around and keep typing them in the chat box. But if not, you'll are free to leave. The session is over. Thank you so much for coming again. Okay, ma'am, कितना हो गया chapter? Tanishq, I think 3 parts are over. I think there are like 7 sub themes or something in the chapter, right? So three sub themes are over. I'm pretty sure by the end of next week we'll be able to finish this chapter. Not next week also. We have a class on Sunday, we have on Monday, we have on Wednesday, right? So maximum by Wednesday we can finish this chapter, Tanishq. I know to read, I know to write, but I don't know to speak Hindi. Anyways, is the answer clear? Like maximum we'll finish it by Wednesday, so that we can have a quick quiz on Friday, and then from after that we can do like the map pointing thing or like quick preparations and all that stuff. Yeah. Cool. If that is it, then we can close the class. Cool. So I do not see any further questions. Therefore, I'm winding this up. Also, like, sorry for taking up your time on a festival day, but like, other than that, happy Dashara, everyone. Yeah. Enjoy the remaining hours of the festival. Yeah. And also have a good evening. Have a good day tomorrow. Have a good weekend, right? But I'll see you guys again on Sunday at 11 a.m. to discuss this chapter further. Till then, bye and take care. Yeah.